Chair Rita Kaur, Professor Dr. Daud Hassan, and Mercedes Pardo. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Deputy Ministers of the Republic of Turkey, ambassadors and representatives of Turkish Great National Assembly. I would like to thank to the heads of national and international organizations that have organized this valuable event for us. I really would like to say that I'm having the grateful feelings to be in here, and I would like to thank to them for their hospitality. I also would like to welcome the deans from various universities, the professors, the academicians, and the students who are right now with us. As a maritime professor and head of Institute of Marine Sciences and Technology in İzmir 9 Eylül University, I would like to admit that I am having the honor to be involved in this community. So from the first session, which was having a great success, we have added so many information to our knowledges. Right now, as you know from the second session, we will be talking about marine environment protection and blue economy systems. As you know, until maybe 10 or 15 years, we were just having precautions and making regulative affairs upon the occurrence of disasters. And this has given a very big damage to the marine environment. But right now, in the near future, we are taking some precautions and trying to foresee what may happen, which may threats to the marine environment. Therefore, from our very valuable speakers, I am waiting them to evaluate what precautions have been taken through international conventions maybe or national legislations, and what are their consequences, whether they have failed or they have the success. And because of that, the blue economy will be affected, because if we can ensure strongly the maritime environment protection, therefore we will have to ensure and we will have the approach to blue economy systems. So, as you know, in the second section, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Professor Dr. Alexander Proeus, to talk about fragmentation and coherence in the legal framework for the protection of the marine environment. But first of all, I would like to give a short video of him. Professor Alexander Proeus is the chair in the International Law of the Sea and International Environmental Law, Public International Law and Public Law at the Faculty of Law of the University of Hamburg, where he is also the director of the Institute for the Law of the Sea and for Maritime Law. Prior to his move to Hamburg, he was professor for public law, in particular public international law and European Union law, and director of the Institute of Environmental Law and the Institute for Legal Policy at Trier University. International environmental law and the international law of the sea constitute the focal points of his research. Alexander Proeus has been a member of several national and international research consortia and has advised state agencies, international organizations and NGOs, both in Germany and abroad at numerous occasions. So from reading of this short video, I understand that I will have the answers to my questions, whether the precautions have been taken, has the success or not, from our various speakers. And I would like to say that you have got 15 minutes, Professor. So in the first session, the speakers have got 10 minutes. Now it has been told me we have got 15 minutes. In equity, maybe 12.5 minutes, but 15 minutes is yours. Okay. Thank you.
Madam President, thank you very much for these kind words. And I do regret already that I did send what was actually called a short CV. I didn't keep it short enough. So thanks for these kind words. Excellencies, dear colleagues, it is really a big pleasure for me to appear today here. The first time for me in Montenegro and the first time appearing in one of the conferences organized by the A true pleasure. Thank you so much for the kind invitation. We are just in the process of establishing a cooperation between our institutes, and I do so much look forward to filling this with life. Now, 15 minutes is super challenging. I lost already one of them. Now, this is going to be kind of an introductory talk to the session on marine environmental protection law. I'm going to focus on an issue which I call fragmentation and coherence. Now, this obviously is a contradiction in terms, and what I try to say is what can be done by international law concerning the marine, the protection of the marine environment in order to avoid fragmentation in favor of coherence. And without further ado, let me start by reminding all in this room that this legal regime concerning the protection of the marine environment has indeed developed in a highly fragmented manner. There's numerous international conventions and treaties around that do have a word to say concerning the protection of marine species, fisheries, as was addressed in the first session, as well as the avoiding marine pollution. And all this doesn't really, has developed in isolation. And the question is, how do we get together all these different instruments in order to avoid contradicting obligations of states? Such interactions exist with regard to climate change law. Of course, that's a new topic. The law on the conservation of biodiversity, protection of species and habitats, but that's not all. There is further interlinkages with the law concerning international trade, concerning investment, and many others. So, this is a broad subject. It's fragmented, and the question is, how do we get this, how can we put this together into a coherent manner? What I'm trying to say here is that the law concerning the protection of the marine environment is not a self-contained regime. It cannot be looked at in isolation, but it needs to be read together with all the other international treaties as well as customary international law. And because of this cross-sectoral or multi-layered nature of this regime, the risk exists of regime collisions or non-conflicts. What do I mean by this? Conflicting obligations. And to put it very, very easy, conflicting obligations are bad because if one and the same state is obliged to act in one manner, but at the same time it is also obliged to act in another manner, then this is going to end in limbo. Nothing is going to happen to the detriment of the marine environment. This is not a new topic. The United Nations International Law Commission has dealt with the issue of fragmentation a couple of years ago in a study group which was led by Martin Koskinen. And indeed, the ILC stated, and I quote, that fragmentation raises both institutional and substantive problems. I will touch upon very briefly on both of them. And indeed, my friend and colleague James Harrison put it in the following terms. The risk of fragmentation, he said, and I quote, is particularly acute in an area such as the law of the sea, where a large number of organizations and institutions are working on overlapping issues, end quote. I should have started with this quote, then I wouldn't have lost already 4 minutes or 3. Right then, I'm perfectly aware of the fact that Turkey is not a, shall I say not yet, not a party to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, but I will start with this document, which is a constitution for the oceans, as is often referred to. Notwithstanding this, also taking into account that many other representatives are here in this room. Now, this convention is important for many respects. One of the reasons is that it is the first multilateral agreement which contains legal rules and provisions on the protection of the marine environment, no matter what maritime zone is concerned. And this part 12, which is the respective part, which contains all these rules and principles on marine environmental protection, is again in need of further development, of further implementation, simply because it's too broad. So the focus of my talk of the next 10 minutes is the legal machinery that governs, this relationship between the Constitution of the Oceans and the other international legal instruments that exist. And I do this by focusing on first, implementation, secondly, interpretation, and thirdly, on conflict avoidance and resolution. Most of this is treaty-based, but not all. Some of the issues which I'm going to speak about are also relevant under customary international law. What is implementation? No need to go into any detail. It is the further substantiation of comparatively general and abstract legal rules and principles. And this is exactly the approach on which the Law of the Sea Convention is based upon. It requires, it even expressly demands further substantiation and development. How is implementation under these terms then going to be done? First, by implementation agreements, and we have already mentioned the ongoing BB&J negotiations. We have already mentioned, at least during lunch break, the Part 11 implementation agreement. We have briefly mentioned the Spread and Fish Stocks agreement, which is also an implementation agreement. I'm not going to deal with those. But what I'm going to focus on is what is called external rules. Obligations under other international treaties, as well as customary international law, which are incorporated into the regime of the Convention. And thirdly, I will then make a few comments on international institutions. Now, this is the general structure, and I'm not going to go into any detail of how implementation works by way of further agreements. We have Part 12 on the protection of the marine environment of the Law of the Sea Convention. This is further substantiated by global agreements. When it comes to shipping, this is the MARPOL Convention. When it comes to dumping, this is the London Convention and Protocol. Further implementation by regional arrangements, as far as Europe is concerned, the Barcelona regime, the Oslo Convention, the LTT Convention, and so on and so forth. And then finally, implementation on the domestic legal level. As far as MARPOL is concerned, we will have a second talk on the PSSA concept, which is exactly what I'm talking about here, a development and implementation of the general framework of the Convention. But what means external rules then? I said this before, other treaties that are incorporated, and now is the important part, by express reference into the regime of the Convention. I know this is very brief and small, so you probably cannot read it, but examples include references to applicable international rules and standards, international agreed rules and standards, generally accepted international rules and standards, generally accepted international regulations, and so on and so forth. Numerous references to these kind of external rules. First question, do they all mean the same? Probably not. Do they secondly include soft law? It depends. If mention and reference is made to standards, probably yes. Otherwise, probably not. But you see, I'm using the word probably, so there's a lot of uncertainties involved. And this is important, and let me highlight this. This is perhaps my main word that I would like to make. Even those states that have not ratified the external rules, for example, the MARPOL Convention, the London Protocol, get indirectly bound by ratifying the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And I tell you, many states didn't realize when they did it. I know this from my advisory work. It's always a big surprise sometimes if they find out what we also are required to apply the London Protocol. Indirectly, yes. Next challenge, is this also referring to future developments? Do the external rules also include future developments which were not even foreseeable for the parties? The answer is perhaps, and this is a controversial matter. The good news for the marine environment is this could be used simply in order to keep the Convention up to date, adaptable, a living instrument as it is often called. But at the same time, can it really be expected that the contracting parties agree to something which could in future lead to dozens of further obligations under external rules? I just make a question mark here. So the scope of how far this goes depends on treaty interpretation, which I will deal with in a minute. Very briefly, because it has already been touched upon, what actors are responsible for implementation? Well, Part 12 on the protection of the marine environment refers to international organizations or organizations in the singular or plural form. If this is done in the singular form, this is generally considered to be a reference to the IMO, meaning de facto the IMO has been transferred treaty-making or rather law-making powers. If reference is done in plural, it's not just the IMO, but potentially a lot of other organizations, including perhaps regional organizations or even the UN itself, including the United Nations General Assembly and its annual Oceans and the Law of the Sea resolution. Second point, conflict avoidance. How can that be done under treaty law? Well, first by conflict clauses. Conflict clauses are treaty provisions which tell you which treaty enjoys priority in case of a conflict. Now, this sounds great, and indeed the Law of the Sea Convention, as well as many of the other relevant treaties, contain such collision clauses, but these provisions are often surrounded by uncertainties. Indeed, as the International Law Commission has put it, I quote, these clauses are undoubtedly useful, but it is subject to limits to what they achieve, and their meaning or effect may sometimes be obscure, end quote. That is very true. If no such conflict clause is available, or if a state such as Turkey is not bound to the provisions of that very agreement, then of course custom international law becomes relevant, and that means lex specialis, lex posterior, and all these collision principles, which are again surrounded by a lot of uncertainty, because it is sometimes not easy to say which of two instruments is more special. It depends on your perspective. So this approach doesn't really help a lot, which is why in reality a lot of horizontal cooperation has been conducted by way of conclusion of informal memoranda of understanding between the secretariats of individual international environmental agreements. But these do not really come up with binding legal obligations. So it is questionable, whether that is really a helpful tool. Conflict resolution will then be done by courts and tribunals. I'm going to skip that because there will be an extra session, I believe, tomorrow on that matter. My very last point is, I just need 2 minutes, please, Madam President. Interpretation, and in particular dynamic interpretation. I think this is really one of the fundamental topics of general public international law these days. How far can you go with dynamic interpretation? There is now first suggestions, for example, to use the compulsory dispute settlement system of the Law of the Sea Convention in order to litigate climate change damage. Is that possible? Is that maybe going a bit too far? You see, that's not an easy question. When it comes to courts and tribunals, Article 293 of the Convention requires these tribunals, to also apply other law, but this presupposes that the court or tribunal has jurisdiction to decide the case, and that's a different story. And furthermore, the rules of dynamic interpretation set limits by themselves as those deriving from the relevant provision of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. Conclusions, last slide. What I've tried to say is, first, the law on the protection of the marine environment is a cross-sectoral, multi-layered issue, so there's a risk of fragmentation. This risk of fragmentation needs to be tackled in order to achieve coherence. And there are various tools available, all of them, however, surrounded by a specific degree of uncertainty. And with that, thank you so much. I think I take a few moments to start.
Thank you, Professor, for obeying the time exactly. And with his speech, the Professor has explained us the obligations arising from the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and also the conflicting obligations, and how can we implement and have some solutions concerning the conflicting obligations. And this speech maybe is showing us lawmaking is not sufficient. Application of the main law is also having a very huge importance, isn't it? So, thank you, Professor, again, and I would like to give the floor to Shirley Ritter-Kaur for her speech concerning marine protected areas. And when she is going there, I would like to give a short bio of her. Shirley Ritter is a policy research analyst at the Maritime Institute of Malaysia, based in Kuala Lumpur, currently the research fellow and head of the Center for Straits of Malacca. She specializes in marine environmental and research management, ocean governance, marine pollution control, and green maritime industry practices, especially in the port and shipping sector, locally and abroad. She is also attached as an associate fellow at the Institute of Oceanography and Environment of University Malaysia Terengganu, and served as an adjunct lecturer at the China Asian College of Marine Sciences of Xiamen University of Malaysia. Shirley is a 2014 U.S. Department of State IVLP Fellow and previously headed the Environment Division of MIMA, before moving on to focus on the multiple research opportunities in the Straits of Malacca as a vital sea lane of communication with strategic maritime interests. Shirley completed her MSc in Marine Science Policy and Law from the University of Southampton, United Kingdom, BSc Honours, in Marine Biology from University Malaysia Terengganu, and a diploma in multilateral environmental agreements from the University of Eastern Finland. I would like to admit that we are having a very multinational speaker in here. So you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chair, for the very generous introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, speakers, moderators, participants, a very good afternoon to all of you. I saw quite an interest on MBAs earlier in the morning session, and I thought it was going to be more heavy on the hardcore legal aspects. But nevertheless, I'm really excited to share with you a particular focus through my presentation on particularly sensitive sea areas, which is much more relevant to IMO. I'm glad Professor Alex has already put a broad overview on the topic itself, and I'll try to share with you something that's happening in line with the theme that we have current developments in Southeast Asia, since I come from there, and maybe share with you what are some of the focus when we talk about MPAs in relation to ports and shipping in that region and where the status is at the moment. So, ladies and gentlemen, probably for those that are not familiar with MIMA, MIMA is actually the National Policy Research Institute set up by the Malaysian government to advise on policy-related issues when it comes to maritime. I myself have been really focusing on environmental issues, including fisheries to some extent, and MPAs and ocean governance, coastal management, things like that, before I now went into Straits of Malacca specifically. So PSSA is one of the projects which was brought in by IMO to Southeast Asia region, and I'll share with you further details. I was involved as one of the consultants as well. Now, before I go into the details on PSSA here, maybe what we can do is first just introduce something that probably I'm preaching to the converted here, but the details as to what are we referring to when we talk about MPAs. Now, two of the definitions that we can take broadly, at least at the same level, it would be the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD, and of course the IUCN definition, which is again, they play quite a role as well on some of the recent discussions and so on. So it's a geographically designed area which is designated or regulated and managed to achieve, you'll see I highlighted specific conservation objectives. And further to this, there's been so many discussions ongoing and so on. The legislation or other effective means to the effect that it enjoys a higher level of protection in this particular area in comparison to the areas outside this zone. And IUCN says that this should be a clearly defined geographical space, recognized, dedicated and managed to legal or other effective means for long-term conservation. You'll see those are the keywords. Now, there are many other definitions as well, including the one PSSA and some of the other definitions, but pretty much in general sense, the definitions emphasizes on the need for conservation as a key goal. Conservation. And when we talk about conservation, I think, to a certain extent, we will also try to say, there are paper parks, and there were a lot of, qualms or concerns that resources are already depleted. What are we talking about when we say MPAs, right? So I think the other point that has to be highlighted is that management plan to assess whether we are achieving the objectives, again, is something that is receiving much more attention now, so that parks and marine protected areas are not just designated and not evaluated afterwards. So that is another point to highlight. Now, when we talk about international law instruments on marine protected areas, or like the definition says, those areas that are sensitive, there could be two-pronged aspects when we look into this. One, definitely is conservation-driven mechanism. It goes without saying it. The second one is sectoral instruments regulating uses of the sea, as what Professor Alex has also mentioned. Now, MPAs as itself is a very broad area. So I wouldn't be able to cover in the 15 minutes I have all these different types of MPAs. And if I can just try to highlight some, it's all listed there. Marine sanctuaries, parks. In Malaysia we have marine parks, state parks, federal parks, and so on. Monuments, fisheries closures, conservation areas and reserves. Endangered species critical habitats is again something that is now getting much more attention, or it's called IMA, Important Marine Mammal Areas. You'll be surprised that even Southeast Asia is now very heavily discussing IMAs. Of course, EPSA, and then the 30 by 30 target, I think this is something that's getting a lot of attention. Probably I'll try to speak a little bit on this at the end or something. Other effective area-based conservation, OECMs, which is something that's from IUCN itself. I'll be speaking on PSSA, and of course, we've seen recently how the challenges are with regards to MPAs in high seas. Now you'll see this itself could stand like a totally session by itself, but let's look more into PSSAs in that sense. So again, MPAs could have multiple use, it could be no-tech, it could be seasonal, now it all depends on how countries are implementing those. Now I mentioned to you earlier, sectoral, it could be conservation-driven or it could be sectoral. Now if you look at conservation-driven, again I'll quote Professor Alex here, you'll see there's so many different platforms, like wetlands, they've got a particular convention, the law of the sea, of course, biodiversity, there are CBD, endangered species convention, CMS. So these are non-exhaustive, it's just to highlight that it all has its own wings, and sometimes the challenge is really to bring them together. And then when you look into sectoral base, UNCLOS, it opens up to fisheries, has got its own guidelines and its protected status and so on. Shipping is what I'm going to cover. Of course, deep sea and mining, and it could have other areas as well, making it even more complicated in that sense. Now, let's dive into PSSA. Now, PSSA is a particularly recognized area by IMO, which is linked to shipping activities. It is an area where countries would think there is a need for further enhanced protection because of its significance in either these three areas. One, ecological, socio-economic, or scientific attributes. Mainly, the key point is really that this area is known to be vulnerable to damages caused by international shipping activities. Now, in its essence, as to PSSA development itself, under IMO, it has gone through a series of reviews and enhancement and so on, and those are what I've highlighted that history on. When it started in 1980s with Great Barrier Reef, I believe so, and up to 2015, that's the amendments that we're using at the moment. Now, PSSAs, there are around the world. There is a total of 17 PSSAs globally since 1990. The last one was actually approved, designated in Southeast Asia, in Philippines. And then, of course, in 2019, COVID happened, and it slowed down the process a bit. Only PSSA in Asia Pacific between 1990s to 2015, now that is a huge long time, you can see. Was Great Barrier Reef, and of course the extension of Torres Strait later on. In 2016, Papua New Guinea got their status on Joint Interest, and of course 2017, Philippines. Following to which, now I'll share with you why this is important in that region is because IMO felt there was not enough attention given in Southeast Asia towards PSSA. Although shipping activities are huge in that region, so there was a regional project that came in to assist countries to try to look into this matter, and it involved 4 countries. Philippines got its PSSA through this project. There are 3 more countries in line, which includes Malaysia, Indonesia, and Vietnam. Hopefully, will go in a similar direction with Philippines to get its PSSAs. Now you'll see from this map, I won't go into details, but you'll see the empty spot in that region, which is really interesting. I think this really got IMO's attention as to why there is a need to look into this type of marine protected areas in that region. Now, when we talk about MPAs or PSSAs and so on for the enforcement, it is really necessary that if you apply for PSSA, which is a complicated process by itself, you need to have especially one particular characteristic underlined, which is the associated protective measure, or we call it APM, as to how you will be enforcing the management or the enforcement for this particular area, because this involves international shipping. It involves something that's more global. It's not just a national MPA, so it's a bit more complicated. And if you look at the total PSSAs that were mentioned earlier, these are some examples as to what countries would propose. Area to be avoided, mandatory reporting, two-way route, traffic separation schemes, a big one. Pilotage, no anchoring zone, deep water route, precautionary area. Now I'm just saying words, but this has all its own meaning and substance within. Now, if you look at PSSAs in MPAs itself, some people argue, should it really look into that? But if you argue it, marine managed areas allows extraction of resources, defines its long-term conservation goals, and so on. And in the PSSA guidelines in 1991 itself, it refers to MPAs and PSSAs as a means to support MPA objectives. Hence, it qualifies to be one of the MPA categories, which sometimes, especially in the region where I come from, it wasn't looked into in that manner. So it can be viewed as a management tool or mechanism within the larger scope of MPAs in that sense. Why are there discussions towards more PSSAs in Southeast Asia? Is mainly now that we've got the success story out of that regional project I mentioned, it could probably be a model. But I'm not saying we just want to adopt a PSSA for the sake of it. I'll tell you why we need it in a bit. There are no other shipping measures for protection of marine environment in that region. No international protection or regional protection. The only one would be IMO in that sense. So we've got no MPAs that are protected because of the shipping activities. And yet, if you look into Malaysia, Straits of Malacca is there. And we can't do anything much in this particular straits for international navigation because it is an international use area. And we need to get support from countries. It makes things really difficult, and hence, I'll share a bit more on that. There are also other MPAs already in that region, but mostly it's always linked back to fisheries, no fishing zone. That is something that's very generally used. So that is the discussion as to if you speak to the people at IMO and those involved, this is particularly why. Now, if you look at this map, I hope it's clear from the back. Straits of Malacca there, you'll see that those are the shipping lanes, but then those that are highlighted, this is based on a study done by Singapore. There are intersections of shipping hotspots in sensitive areas all around here. It's highly biologically diverse area, and you can see that shipping is such an important element. Now that figure is from IMO, again, it shows the hotspots, the shipping routes, and of course for Malaysia, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore is such a big area. So this is the project that I was mentioning earlier. It involves Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam, and it was funded by IMO, mainly for short-term objectives to assist us, and for long-term objectives to actually promote protection of the environment when we talk about international shipping activities. What they did was basically they left it to the respective countries to choose where they think there is a high-risk area. First thing is whether we want to participate or not. That was given as an option to us. And then to choose the area, and the counterparts were mainly those from the Ministry of Transport or Environment and so on. That's how it went on. And if you believe me, the Philippines one took more than 10 years. This project just came in like later on, so the discussions were all there, but I think sometimes for countries in that region, funding, support, technical capabilities, skills, knowledge, know-how is also important areas to consider, hence the assistance from IMO. The process is really for countries to put up a proposal, and then it goes through a very complicated, long process which I've not put here. Several committees, but the main thing is you submit the proposal to the Marine Environment Protection Committee and EPCIMO. It goes through the subcommittees, it's debated, it's discussed and so on, and then you finally get the approval. So some of the status. Philippines, what they have is the Tuba Reef Natural Park and World Heritage Site, so it's very much based on coral reef protection. There were cases of groundings in this area. They first submitted their paper to MEPC 67, you can count the year from there. The presentation was given in 68. Submission then was done in MEPC 69. You have to then present it to the technical subcommittee NCSR 4 in 2017, and it got the approval then. So it's now a PSSA. For Malaysia, we had a huge challenge because we felt that our area that should get enhanced protection from shipping is in the Straits of Malacca, which made it really difficult for us. We got a lot of challenges from other countries, including US, Japan, China, all those countries that are using the Straits. So we had to work really hard. But our area is down south. If you look up Pulau Pukuk and Tanjung Piai, probably this is one of the only PSSAs in the world that is proposed based on mangrove sites. That is another important element. We were getting a lot of issues from shipping, hence we proposed that down south area. So information paper was submitted in MEPC 68, then we went into MEPC 70 with the actual proposal, but it got a backlash, surprisingly, from our neighboring countries. Indonesia, due to other technical issues like boundaries came in and so on. So while we expect IMO to keep discussions at a very technical level, non-boundary issues and so on, but sometimes we get that kind of backlash as well. So it's something that's still in the pipeline, but we need to negotiate boundaries with our neighbors first. These are some pictures as to, I mentioned to you why we selected this area. We've been getting a lot of oil pollution and it is bad. This is just several pictures, and then it's very difficult for us to trace those ships that are doing this because sometimes they just anchor at night. By the time in the morning, the oil is already in our national parks. This is actually a national park, Ramsar site, and it's in the Straits of Malacca. Now, Vietnam is a bit behind. The information paper was submitted at MEPC 69. They are looking at Halong Bay as a potential PSSA. But their approval and so on is a bit more complicated. It involves the highest level of the government and so on, so it's just halted, it's still there. Indonesia submitted their paper in MEPC 71. They were intending to go in after Malaysia, the next one. But I think due to COVID and change of personalities involved and so on, it's again something that's in the pipeline. They are looking at Lombok Strait. So those are the areas if you look. Now, legal basis for PSSAs. There were at some point arguments saying, well, for instance, Malaysia, you don't have to go to IMO, just introduce something to keep away ships from that particular area. It becomes very difficult because it's a strait used for international navigation and we need IMO as an instrument to enforce it. Hence, we have to go through the process. Now, under the IMO convention, of course, I won't read this to you, but UNCLOS ship exercising passive rights, flag states have the obligation to ensure that ships comply to regulation, procedures, and so on. But when it comes to PSSAs in internal waters and territorial sea, like for instance, our PSSA is actually in our own waters, but because it is in the Straits of Malacca, it becomes a bit more complicated because of that. We have the right to have complete authority in these areas, but then when we go for international tools and mechanisms, we have to go to the proper channel. It depends on where you're proposing it. For straits used for international navigation, I've already elaborated this to you. Archipelagic waters are mentioning this because of Philippines. That's why they managed to use PSSA and got approval from IMO and so on. And of course, in the other water bodies, I'll not go too much into that. Now, what are the expectations when it comes to implementation? When you propose this, it gets approval, you need the legislation to enforce it. You need to modify the electronic paper-based nautical charts, all these is given. You need to have the enforcement rules and plan to review reports. So it's a pre-process, during and after. So it's quite a complete MPA set of guidelines there. Some lessons, I'm almost completing the presentation, some lessons from that region. I'll say it looks a bit more simple when you present it, but it's a very, very long process and it's quite a painful process in the sense of when you go for PSSAs and involves, it depends on where your water body is. Like for us, we negotiated with our neighboring countries before going to IMO, yet we were hampered when we were at the IMO itself. It became a pressure point to discuss other issues before we could come up with this. So while we're talking about conservation protection, sometimes other political will and other issues dampen some of these efforts, unfortunately. Now we had, to a certain extent, the process itself where we were not getting, the right people sometimes keep away from certain discussions and so on, so they cannot make decisions, it takes longer. Political changes, natural events, complex structure, like for instance, if you realize PSSA is a type of MPA where the authority is, at one point, because it's IMO, you have to deal with the Ministry of Transport, but because the subject is environment, you need the Ministry of Environment to involve. That itself becomes not just at the international regional level, but within national level, sometimes it becomes an area that's difficult to deal with. We have to recognize that as an issue. And I'll stop there and probably invite you for questions and discussions afterwards. And thank you very much for your attention.
Rita for explaining us to show due diligence and utmost care to marine protected areas and explaining us the process how to declare the marine protected areas. But I should admit I'm not surprised with the big countries' objections to declarations of these marine protected areas, unfortunately. And I have got a question, but I'm leaving this question to the question and answer parts because I'm wondering how, in the process, how they are deciding what are the particular criteria to declare these sensitive areas. Now, after understanding the importance of marine environment protection, we can take the subject one step further and we can evaluate the consequences of having a good marine environment and clean marine environment by having the blue economy. So in this part of the session, I would like to give the floor to Professor Davut Hassan for his speech on blue economy and marine spatial planning. But of course, I would like to first of all introduce him to you. Professor Hassan is the Foundation Director of the International Ocean Governance Center at the University of Western Sydney. Currently, Professor Hassan is serving as a professor and head of law at the University of South Pacific. He served as the Director of Higher Degree Research, WSU School of Law, Head of Interdisciplinary Law Programs, WSU and Director of Research and Postgraduate Programs, Victoria University, Australia. He is an adjunct professor of law at the University of New England, Australia. Professor Hassan is a leading scholar in international and comparative marine international law and ocean governance. His research addresses global and regional environmental issues that are of international significance. The international stature of Professor Hassan's work has been recognized by visiting professorships at various universities across Asia and Europe, including Bern University, Switzerland, University of Lapland, Finland, and Ankara University, Turkey. He was awarded the Essex University International Visiting Fellowship Award in 2018, the Wageningen University Research Award, Netherlands in 2018, Hong Kong Baptist University Visiting Fellowship Award in 2012. Professor Hassan holds a PhD in the law of the sea and is actively engaged in supervising PhD students in the areas of international and comparative environmental law, law of the sea, and climate change and international human rights law. Professor, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Distinguished guests, excellencies, colleagues, and friends. Thank you again, Madam President, for generous introduction. It's a bit long. I'm sorry for that. It is an absolute privilege and honor to be here, and I'm very much grateful to the organizer inviting me to share some thoughts on blue economy and marine spatial planning. I must say here that I have a very good and long-standing established relationship with DEOCOM, and I'm very particularly grateful to Professor Hakan Karan, and also I would like to mention here that recently we have established a research consortium under the leadership of DEOCOM and particularly Professor Hakan Karan and Professor Ademon. So the consortium name is CONSMAR. That's a consortium on marine consortium for marine studies research and blue economy. So what I'm going to, this is my presentation will be very straightforward. I'm just what I'm trying to address that why blue economy is important in terms of our current and future generations, and what is actually blue economy. And in order to achieve the benefits of blue economy, what we need to do, particularly we need to focus on sustainable ocean governance. But what is sustainable ocean governance? And in order to achieve the objectives of sustainable ocean governance, that what are the management approach and what will be the implementation tool to achieve the benefit of blue economy? So we are familiar with the blue economy, we are familiar with the marine spatial planning, but also I would like to introduce another thought that also is available, that is sustainable blue economy. So we all are familiar here about sustainable development. The development meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So when you are talking about blue economy, so simply what is blue economy? Blue economy is nothing but ocean-based economy, and that refers to economic growth by maintaining a healthy ocean ecosystem. And there is a strong relationship between sustainable ocean governance and blue economy. The sustainable ocean governance refers to some processes, some framework, rules, and also established norms that develop for sustainable use of marine ecosystem without causing any negative impact or any threat to the marine environment. So, simply that sustainable ocean governance is the key aspect of blue economy, and it has sustainable ocean governance has become a global priority commitment for a healthy ocean ecosystem. And we, in the first session, we already learned that the importance of oceans, and also Professor Hakan mentioned in his introductory comments, and also a couple of other speakers, that we are living in a world that really oceans are interconnected. Even now we don't say oceans, we say ocean. That means that it is so vital, and all the important resources there. Ocean for food, ocean for mineral, ocean for transportation, ocean for recreation, and ocean for our overall survival for the current generation and future generation. So there was a time we used the ocean as a dumping ground, for example. But we also know that those who have background in science that GSMP that from since 1980 onwards that ocean's capacity is limited. It's not vast. So we have to use the ocean in a way. Now we need to give the ocean back. How? Obviously, relying on sustainable ocean governance. So now I'm just why I'm introducing sustainable blue economy, because for not for current generation, it's also important for future generation that links with socio-economic benefits for current and future generation, particularly food security, poverty eradication, livelihoods, income and employment. This also links with Sustainable Development Goal 2030, that number 1, 3, 8, and 11. And importantly, since we are talking about ocean governance, that Sustainable Development Goal 14 is significantly important here, that relates to restoration, protection, and maintenance, diversity, productivity, and intrinsic value of marine ecosystem. So again, it's a sustainable ocean governance is prerequisite if you want to achieve the real objectives of blue economy within a particular maritime area. It could be a territorial sea, it could be exclusive economic zone, and nowadays not necessarily that we have a constitution for ocean governance. That is obviously 1982 law of the Sea Convention. But in my personal view, always I focus on customary international law as well, the duty to cooperate. That we are living in a world so not necessarily what is as also we heard this morning that is a package deal, but at the same time it's a comprehensive document, and comprehensive document for ocean governance. It has provided certain basis, legal basis that we can go further. We have number of development, but that is the first and foundation that we can rely on and go for any kind of environmental development issue, protection of the environment. We have number of I'm not going to details particular provisions from the law of the sea, but I will briefly note that some parts of the law of the sea is still applicable, can be used for management principle like ecosystem management, at the same time marine special planning, because it has provided some legal basis, although not explicitly, although we have some other soft law development since 1992 and onwards. Sustainable ocean governance is, as I said, is prerequisite to achieve the objective of sustainable blue economy by confirming these things: sustainable use of the marine resources, a balance between economic and environmental interests, and sustainable management of ocean activities and marine resources. And not only that, also in order to achieve the benefits of blue economy and in order to achieve the objectives of sustainable, they fulfill the prerequisite of sustainable ocean governance. Maritime security is important. That you also know there are two types of security here: the traditional security issue and the non-traditional security issue. The traditional, we all know that human trafficking, illegal broadcasting, illegal trafficking, the piracy, all this. But importantly, non-traditional security is very important. That is pollution control and unsustainable exploitation of living resources, marine living resources. In the morning we heard that there is no fish in the ocean. So if we don't take appropriate measure in a sustainable manner, relying on sustainable ocean governance tools, then obviously will be the whole world will be in danger in foreseeable future. So we need to think very constructively in a way that we can produce the law of the sea provided foundation in part 5 of the law of the sea convention, conservation of living resources and marine living resources, and also in the part 7 high sea parts of the high sea in the law of the sea convention. So provision is there, but we need to use it in a way, in a cooperative way, in a coordinated way, so that we can make some we can achieve some common objectives for our current generation and future generation. So how can we do that? That's the thing, is that we need simply that more functional and more sustainable management regime, and importantly that improved planning that I mentioned here and management system. And in this particular context, I just point out very special planning, but in order to very special planning simply an implementation tool for sustainable ocean governance. But in order to achieve the very special planning, you need to undertake some management principles, ecosystem-based management. So I will come on that, and then I will highlight that what is very special planning and how the very special planning can be useful. And also I will try to highlight some development in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea, and also in general Mediterranean Sea, and what are the development in the Mediterranean Sea, and how we can make some progress to achieve the real benefits of blue economy in the Mediterranean Sea region, because we have 66 large marine ecosystem in the world. Large marine ecosystem, and Mediterranean is one of them. So what kind of coordination are needed, what kind of diplomatic relationship needs to be established. The law does not provide all the solutions. Sometimes we need to undertake certain kind of negotiative initiative, some kind of diplomatic initiative that can provide some kind of real benefit to this part of the world, particularly Mediterranean Sea region. So simply just I thought that I can't talk about marine spatial planning unless I'm making some kind of comments about ecosystem management. You can see sometimes it's an integrated approach for the management of ocean spaces or resources for the improvement of ocean health. And it also provides important framework for assessing biodiversity, ecosystem services, and also is implementing important responses in different ways. Because NSP is simply the very special planning is a public process of analyzing and allocating ocean spaces in a certain manner, simply to achieve socio-economic and environmental objectives. And it was also other, because the blue economy introduced a new way of ocean management. It has, in other words, it has introduced a new dimension of ocean management. And ecosystem management is providing some kind of foundation, and in order to achieve the objective of ecosystem management, we need to introduce and implement marine spatial planning because of certain benefits of marine spatial planning. And also, the zoning is also relevant in this context. And that in terms of sustainable ocean governance and particularly marine spatial planning, one of the pioneer examples is the Great Barrier Marine Farm. It has a comprehensive regime. It has developed the number of legislative schemes and of the ocean policy. All this is provided a comprehensive regime, and zoning was introduced there, and you can see the zoning simply a toolkit for implementing ecosystem approach by protecting plants, animals, and habitats in the marine environment. Important target here is to achieve a healthy ecosystem. And the MSP that facilitated ecosystem management by ensuring equitable access to marine resources and benefit arising from those type of various activities and uses. So, you can see that due to the increased development and industrial development, the ocean uses have increased significantly. If there is an increased use, then obviously there is an increased pressure. In order to deal with this increased pressure, we need improved planning. And marine spatial planning is bringing some kind of thought that certain areas can be, through zoning system, that certain areas can be used for multiple purposes, certain areas can be used for one particular purposes, and certain areas are completely prohibited. You cannot use that certain area for any purposes. So it's balancing. And also, it's such a win-win situation that you can achieve at the same way the the important objective of ecosystem management, protecting the environment, at the same time you are getting economic benefits from there. So that's why marine spatial planning has become an implementation tool for the implementation of EPM to achieve sustainable ocean management. So it's very commonly used, it's very familiar that you can have marine spatial planning work, that different activities, but it's planned way, and it is not a conflict with each other. If there is no plan, then various reasons can be conflicted with each other. Marine spatial planning is reducing that conflict and achieving the socio-economic and environmental objectives, as I mentioned. And just here, that because of the importance of marine spatial planning, it has been used in different parts of the world. Now, out of 5 continents, four continents are covered by MSP, including many countries in Europe, many countries in Asia. So it has a global dimension now. And also, apart from sustainable development on 2030, that also that Sustainable Development Summit at 2016 highlighted the importance of this ecosystem development, marine spatial planning, and very recently that the Ocean Conference in Portugal that was held end of June to first week of July, first or second of July. It was important discussion was basically that, and also highlighted and focused on the marine spatial planning and blue. So that's our destiny. We need to, if we want to get the benefit, then we need to rely on that particular aspect. So I'm just then this is the large marine. This is the world. That's as I said, the 66 large marine ecosystem, and Mediterranean is one of them. So, and we all know here that I just provided a brief information that how important the Mediterranean Sea, Mediterraneanism, but the key concern here that we need to protect vulnerable marine ecosystem and enhance maritime economies in an integrated, sustainable manner. There is no other alternative but to use marine spatial planning, but begin the nature of Mediterranean Sea and it is a semi-enclosed sea, and that's why my thoughts and also my preferred view is that transboundary marine spatial planning is more effective in terms of Mediterranean Sea, Eastern Mediterranean Sea, Western Mediterranean Sea, and Southern part of Mediterranean Sea. We can discuss in a different way. So because, as I said last, we said that Mediterranean Sea can be seen as a development space that, if used sustainably, may create economic prosperity and contribute to the stability in the Mediterranean Sea region. Because it has lots of potentials, but it's also affected through unsustainable exploitation, unsustainable use, and climate change also affecting significantly here. Just, I don't want to go through these things, that we have legislative scheme, we have Constitution for the Ocean, apart from all the sea, we have MARPOL, we have London Convention, and we have also other soft law instruments. As I mentioned in the beginning, we have provided a legal basis, although not explicitly mentioned EPM and MSP, but soft law documents since 2002, it's frequently mentioned about MSP and ecosystem management. And it is flexible, and we can use those legal information, in a soft law information to use it in different ways.
Professor, yes,
just 2 minutes.
Okay.
And we can see, and you can see that apart from the Constitution for the Ocean, we have regional development that here Mediterranean Sea region, and the significant development we can see. They say that there is a relative success here, but we need to do more. And basically, that all this development has provided legal basis for ocean governance, but we need to go further. And also, COVID impacted significantly here. But again, considering the Mediterranean Sea semi-enclosed sea, we need to come back again for a cooperative relationship, and we need to put more effort in a collaborative way to promote and implement a transboundary MSP in the region is very important. So that's, as I said, that is a transboundary MSP is a way forward because of the importance of this semi-enclosed sea, and and we also need to consider these important aspects that, and I mentioned the different pointed out that concluding remarks, that particularly we need high-level representation and commitment from all the nation states in the Mediterranean Sea. And importantly, that the research capacity building and sustainable human resources, and also is important to encourage and promote social entrepreneurs. And again, I'm highlighting that apart from the legal regime, apart from the legal and policy development, the negotiation and reduce disagreement between the nation states, all the different states of the Mediterranean Sea through diplomatic channels. Those are very important. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Professor. And thank you for giving us the information that not ensuring blue economy, but sustainability of blue economy is also very important. And security shall be taken into consideration together with the managemental proceedings. And also, he has also attracted our attention to this. Upon the occurrence of the disasters, we are pushed to understand and pushed to make some managemental and regulative issues, unfortunately. So thank you so much. I would like to give the floor to our last speaker, Mercedes Pardo, for her speech on blue economy and new jobs for next generations. As a mother of two sons, I'm really wondering what are the new jobs, new opportunities to our generation, valuable generation. But before I give you the floor, I would like to introduce you to our community. She has been graduated in communication science. She is the chief executive officer in Spanish Maritime Institute, member of the board in Spanish Maritime Cluster, president of the Blue Education Association, member of the board World Organization in Logistics Platforms, manager of the working group of Maritime Education and LATAM of Maritime Spanish Cluster, speaker in the conferences such as our conference and International Maritime and Educational Congress, director of the Maritime Chair in the Catholic University of Murcia, director master degree in shipping business and maritime law from ICAG University, member of the Spanish Maritime Law Association and the Ibero-American Maritime Law Institute, WISA member, Women International Shipping and Trading Association, which in Turkey we have the office. Floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation for the Karadağ'ın Institute. It's a pleasure really to have this floor here and all the speakers and all the participants that some of them I know. So really thank you for this opportunity. And I'm not talking about law, not this afternoon, not at this time. I am talking about blue economy, but also about the new generations, okay? Because I work in training, I work in education for maritime, and I think it's really important to be aware of the importance of have new generations of people that want to work in our industry. So, first of all, I would like to start with this statement that I suppose you all agree, it's not mine, it's Arthur Clarke, that is how inappropriate is to call this planet Earth when it should be called ocean. Almost it's blue, so really the importance of the ocean, I think now we are aware of that, but not until a few years ago, until the blue economy came out, we didn't recognize the importance of the oceans. No? So I just want to wake you up at this hour with this slide. And I will start talking about blue economy. The definition in the European Union is the one that recognizes the importance of the seas and the oceans as drivers for the economy due to the great potential of innovation and growth. So you will agree with me that the importance of blue economy is real and it has a very great potential that we have to try to work all together. So I would like to show you this slide about the subsectors of the blue economy. The European Union has defined 7 ones, and I would like just to go around the coastal tourism, the marine living resource with the fish primary production and the processing of fish products, distribution, the marine non-living resources, that I think tomorrow we are talking about that, the oil and gas, or the minerals, and the support activities. Something happened with the, sorry. And the port activities, of course, they are really important, very related with the shipping, the cargo warehousing, the shipbuilding and ship repair, the maritime transport, passenger, also commodities, service for transport. And this last one, that is the one that is going to get very important in the next few years, that is floating offshore wind, wave and tidal energy, floating solar, photovoltaic energy on sea. So all these institutions and much more, they talk or they put the focus on the blue economy. The World Economic Forum recognized the oceans that are responsible for producing more than the 50% of the energy of the Earth. The Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development recognized that by 2030, the ocean-based industry will employ more than 40 million people. That's quite a lot. I will show you afterwards how much we are right now. Another thing that is very important, I think that you mentioned in the morning, is about the priority of promotion of gender balance in the maritime profession. I think the most is the seafarers, you know, the difficulties they have of having the family and the work so far from their house. The European Commission has been promoting the blue skills and careers because they are really aware of the importance that is having people qualified. And then the maritime clusters, they are really very important, not only the national clusters, national maritime clusters, but the European network of clusters, that they work for the cooperation in the blue economy, in between the countries. So now I started giving you economic data of blue economy. Here I just want to show you that the gross value added, the turnover, and the profit. If you see, not the figure inside the circle, but the percentage that is growing. You see it's growing in 22% and 50% from 2009. This is a report that I suggest you, the Blue Economy report from this year that is already in the market. Even the figures are from 2019. Here we have, you know, the direct employment, the indirect, and the induced employment. Well, now I am talking, sorry if I didn't say, about the European Union, okay? So the employment in the blue economy is more than 7 million right now. And if we see the total of persons employed, this figure is from 2020, 4 million, this is all the direct employment. Well, you see there all the countries. But in the next year, I would like to show you that the most important right now are the coastal tourism with the 63%, and the marine living resources, all about the capture and the distribution and the processing of fishing. I would like to show you this figure because I think it's really incredible to see the percentage in the last column. This is from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. If you see the offshore wind, for example, that is incredible, the growth that is expected in the next 10 years, because this was expected from 2010 to 2030, now we are in 2022, is 1,257. So, as I say, the blue economy is growing up, and we have to do it together. But all the percentages, if you see, they are all growing up. So this is, I think, a good news for our industry. Now here I want to show you just issues and challenges that we have in the maritime sector. It's growing, it's developing too fast. We have the climate change, the geopolitical tension of the workforce, as well. Some of the issues we have to work on them. New environmental regulation, the decarbonization of shipping. We have to have less dependence on suppliers. Because of this energy crisis we are going on, and about the workforce, because we have to work in digitalization and training new skills. Here I want to show you a survey that the Global Maritime Issues has made, like I think 1 year ago, something like that. And the question was, what impact do you think the following issues will have on the shipping industry over the next 10 years? So if you see, the first one is decarbonization with 346. And IMO's working in decarbonized shipping, and the industry is already working in alternative fuels and ship design to improve ship efficiency. And here the other question, I just took two of them because I think it is the most relevant. is if our industry is prepared to deal with these following issues. And here the issues are run from 1 to 4, and the one in autonomy technology, we are not prepared at all. So we are more prepared in major safety incident with 2.77. But if you see here, there is a lot of work to do about everything, about big data, about environment, terrorism, etc. Which skills are required in shipping? Well, this is about a paper that I presented like 2 months ago in a conference with engineers, with naval architects, and here I define only the hard skills and the power skills that you know are the soft matter plus the hard skills. So well, all these I suppose you know. I just want to show you because I want to talk about the skills. Now we are, as I say, this is moving too fast. So we have to move so fast, and the people have to learn not only in upskilling, that is the process of adding new competences, but in reskilling, because we have to learn new skills to move on a new role in our company. So we have to prepare in these 2 sides all the professionals that are working, because everything is changing so much. And here I put an example of how this is affecting our industry. Cloud computing, big data, all these things. You have heard of this a lot of times. Well, if we apply it to our industry, we have the digital twin that is used not only for the training of the crew, but also for the maintenance of the ships, as part also of the commercial presentation. The big data, for example, is used not only in optimizing the new building and the fleet planning and the energy saving, but also as you can have the marine accidents statistics and prevention of these marine accidents. The use of drones, you've heard of it, not only in fishing captures, but also in shipping inspection, the control of pollution, cloud computing, access to software and data from any computer on board ship, and also for monitoring, and all the information and documents are only in one location, in the cloud. Here, I don't have time, but here is a video very interesting if you want to see this, that about an example, some of you, I suppose you know, the 4D printing of a ship, of the world's largest ship. It was made by a 4D print. Also, augmented and virtual reality logistics, not only in storage, but also in picking, is working now. And also nanotechnology, that is the nanoparticulates for corrosion, for shipbuilding, and also they are used, the carbon nanomaterials, as absorbents for the sulfurization of fuels, that you know now it's priority to have the very low sulfur fuels. What are the most demanded professionals in the maritime shipping? Here you have an example. If you see, things are changing. Now we have directors with a good knowledge in environmental, social, and governance. These years ago, it was not so important. No? You have the impressors of 3 and 4D. You have operators of drone pilots. Here I brought new professions that are coming into the market, and we have to be prepared. Responsible of cybersecurity and risk analytics specialists. So these professions, they did not exist 20 years ago. They are now going on, and they are growing. So we have to be prepared for that. So here, as a conclusion, I just want to say the challenge in the blue economy, as we saw the carbonized industry, we are all working to have carbon zero shipping in ports and in every sector, subsector of the blue economy. But here I want to stop because education is really important. Not only the upskilling, the reskilling, but the education. We need the young people. We need to work with schools in the primary ages and work just to try to get these children and to have new generations of people that love sea, that is going to take care of the oceans, but also is going to work in the ocean, because the ocean is going to bring the blue economy a lot of work. No? We have to attract talent, not only from careers that have to be with the sea, but also from mathematics, engineers, why not chemistry? We have a lot of careers that doesn't have to do with city, and they are really interesting for us. So we have to attract that talent. And of course, the companies will have to retain this talent in the blue economy, because if the talent goes out, we're not going to be a competitive sector. So here, I would like just to finish to ask or to say to the governments, the countries, that they have to be aware of the importance of blue economy, and we have all to work together. We cannot work by our own. We have to work together, and we have to work for the society, for our blue economy out the society, to give the visibility we need, and not talking about all the pollution that only we appear in the news because of the pollution. We have to work from the very, very, very first age of the schools. And here I just want to try to translate that to you. So you, in your families, in your schools, in your universities, work in getting new talent for the blue economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pardo. But I want you to be sure that the new generation is in love with technology. And so what we should do is to attract their attention to the maritime and the seas maybe, and then with the combination we can achieve many things. So Ms. Pardo has explained us opportunities which have been brought by the blue economy, especially based on technology. In terms of all measures, as we have seen from the diagrams, we can understand that there is a very big growth in all manners. But together with the new opportunities, we have new challenges. And from a multidisciplinary approach, maybe we can get over from these challenges and turn these challenges to our benefits. So, dear guests and dear participants, I would like to close this session and with the speaks and now pass to the questions and answers part. And I can see the hands right now, so you can take, no, the lady. Ladies first.
Thank you very much. I'm Professor Elia from Spain. Thank you and congratulations to all the panelists and the trade. So I actually have a lot of questions, but I know that we have no time, and I will try to limit myself, starting from Professor Proles. Maybe it's a sort of theoretical observation from my point of view, because you talk about fragmentation specifically in maritime law. But from a point of view of theory of international law, I just thinking on an article of Professor Conforti published on, if I remember, Revue Générale du Droit International, Glisset Mortel n'appuyez pas, in relation to fragmentation, meaning that it's a sort of natural process of reorganization of the international legal order, because increasingly the international legal order is going to regulate many sectors. So the point is, if we accept that this is not a case of fragmentation but a creation of a new structure of the international legal order, should we think that maybe we need more coordination between relevant mechanisms engaged in the same regime, let me use, or sub-regime of international law? So to Professor Pardo, the point...
maybe step by step, first of all, take the answer and then the question. Concentration, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. In a way, I agree with Professor Conforti that it comes with the expansion of subjects, of actors, of anything of international law, that the system gets more fragmented. If that is meant by a natural process, yes, of course. The thing is, and I think that is also the observation made by the International Law Commission, that because this has just developed step by step, there are no mechanisms available that bind it all together, or at least we have to search for these mechanisms. And it was my attempt, by taking the specific area of maritime protection law, to look for certain, tools, as I called it, in order to react to this development. So I think that the observation is correct, but since we don't have a centralized legislator, since I don't believe in the international community as a legal tool as many others, and I'm saying this in full awareness of many scholars that take a different position, that since such mechanisms don't exist, it is difficult. And what I would usually argue for is, let's try to use what we have in order to meet the challenges. And this is why I focus on implementation and interpretation. But it's a long discussion. Your question is perfectly legitimate, and I'm not saying that this is the only possibility of how to deal with it. Thanks.
And your last question, please, to...
So actually two shorter. For Madam Pardo, is not related to law, is related to the fact that you request for talent for education. That's the point. In my view, we are losing education to the advantage of training. What we need is unifying education, which is different from training, to training. Because there is no special training without a support of basic values. We can find only education. That's my view, and I would like to hear you. And for Professor Hassan, thank you very much for your intervention. The very short question, because everyone, and especially you, did reference to ecosystem. From a legal point of view, if we don't meet a definition, a clear definition of ecosystem, actually, what is an ecosystem? How we can protect that? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, this is because of the time cost. This is a good question, because if you look at the definition, there are many definitions of ecosystem-based management, but particularly that OSPAR Commission and also Helsinki Commission extensively define ecosystem management, that is integrated approach for sustainable use of marine species and resources for the benefit of the marine environment, also to improve the marine ecosystem. So in nutshell, that also it is defined, that's the acceptable definition that comes from OSPAR and HELCOM. So it is clearly mentioned the definition of ecosystem management. So, and I didn't hear any kind of controversy about that definition, and it is well accepted at this stage. So just I summarize that from that definition that is established through those two convention commissions. Yeah. Thank you.
And you, please.
My name is I'm a lawyer, member of Istanbul Second Bar Association. Nowadays, people say future is electric. So I would like to touch this topic because even today we are complaining about cars, factories that the factories that produce cars with diesels or petrol engines, they are clean, but the cars are dirty. Now the topic is the cars that they produce are clean, but the factories are dirty, they say. So in the future, it's clear that the future is electric, but for the blue economy, I would like to say about this. I'd like to talk about this. Last week I went to a fair and I saw a fan in a flute in the sea, which produces 60 house electric for cities. So I think, this is my own view, I think the blue economy is also green. So I would like to ask actually Mrs. Mercedes, but if you would like to answer one of you, how do you see the future? Because sadly, we only think first the production line and the profit if we produce something. But the nature and environment always comes first, second. So we can even see this, the cars they invented 1880s, but just last 5 years they are just trying to produce car parts which is recyclable. So I would like to listen from you that what do you think about the future of the green, the blue, because we would like to also protect our world about the future problems. Thank you.
Ladies first. Do you have any comments concerning the future of the blue economy?
I didn't understand. Sorry, but I didn't understand. The question is what do I think about the...
My question about...
it's not a question. It's not a question.
Yes, it was not. I just want your comments about the blue economy in the future. Will it also be green as well? The environment friendly.
Yeah. I think it's working now. That we are working now in be social and responsible environmental. About the offshore wind farms, they have a lot of studies about how it's going to affect not only below the sea, but also about the birds and all the animals they live in that place. So there is studies that they are there are studies that are before you put an offshore wind farm in the sea. There is a kind of studies that they are just to know that it's not going to affect not only the animals but also the what is the other sea that I don't know the name right now. So yes, of course. We are concerned about that. The problem is when the offshore wind farm, in that example, if you go when the product is finished after 15 years of the offshore wind, what do you do with all that? The disinstallation, that's a problem, no? There you are going to, But I suppose that in 15 years we will have learned about that. So, but I am sure that they will be thinking about that also.
I just want to add just a minor thing that you're right, because obviously you can see the conflict because when we're talking about green, when we're talking about blue. But if we were to make it narrow down in a way that we are using blue, basically focused on ocean. So from that perspective, but again, because it's not a clear answer as well. But we need to wait and see that how we can progress and we can marry this together. That in terms, but the overall objective is the same. We want to see a greener economy. We would like to see a green world. But when we're coming back to the ocean, that we are using technically the blue in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor? Okay, Ladies first, and then Professor Ademir.
Thank you very much. Najiba Mustafayeva, I'm Azerbaijani, but represent the Ibn Haldun University in Turkey. My question to Professor Alexander. You absolutely perfectly mentioned that this area is totally fragmented, and that fragmentation also occurs in the fact that the international law faced with the challenge of non-state actors. So the whole range of the principles and norms that you mentioned in your presentation, those treaty and customary law rules, mainly are legally binding for subjects of international law, so for the states and international organizations. So my question is how contemporary international law need to react to the challenge of non-state actors, for example, transnational companies, businesses that also are involved in the violation of environmental issues and maritime area in particular, and how to create some mechanism maybe of legal accountability under international law for that non-state actors. Thank you so much.
I just said to Madam President that, you know, these are the 10 minutes that we have left. But I mean, for that's such a fascinating question. I didn't include it in the presentation, that's true. Let me make one observation. I find it fascinating to see that the relevance of non-state actors, to me, seems bigger on some fields of international law than on others. And the prime field on where we can witness what is called the transnationalization of international law is climate change law, and perhaps international environmental law on a broader scale. I would say not yet to the same degree in the law of the sea. I would consider the law of the sea as a more state resilient system than other areas of international law, and it is a fascinating question why that is the case. Now, that is a question for an entire symposium. This is not meant to say that non-state actors would not gain in importance. They do. You mentioned the transnational corporations. NGOs involved in refugee distress action, indigenous and local communities and their impact on, say, Canadian law of the sea, for example, marine scientific researchers that, you know, do companies starting to do carbon dioxide removal activities on the high seas. So how is international law of the sea reacting to that? Not in terms of binding law so far. I'm not seeing this coming, but what I think is getting more and more importance are the due diligence obligations of states in observing, monitoring, enforcing existing legal standard towards these non-governmental entities. But should the law of the sea develop similar to international environmental law, and I think that's an open question, then we will definitely see a bottom-up movement which is going to result in non-state actors gaining in importance. Whether that is going to happen or not is a really difficult one, and I'm not going to try to answer that. But maybe that is just a little bit of an answer to your question.
Thank you. Professor Odeke, do you want to ask a question?
Moderator, my neighbor here asked a question, and I wasn't very sure whether it was answered.
Oh, really?
No, I wasn't sure whether it was fully answered. I just want to come to the rescue of the panel, because it can be very hard being there and having questions being shot at you. But I think if I'm correct, and I stand to be corrected, if I'm correct, I think what the gentleman was saying, that is there room for the green economy. And I think if that understanding is correct, it's based on the theory of color coding of the environment and the way forward. This theory is based on the idea that until recently we have been having a brown economy both at sea and on land. brown economy where we were banning, fossil fuels. We didn't really mind about issues. We didn't mind about environment. We didn't mind about anything. That's the brown economy. And there are people who are making money from the brown economy. First and foremost are the energy and oil industries. Now, the idea then of the green economy and the blue economy is obviously, the blue economy is for the sea, and we know that the sea is about, I think it's 79%, 71% of the globe. Land is about 29%. Now, the concept of the green economy is that unless we have the green economy and the blue economy together, we are going to have a relapse. Because we can't concentrate on the blue economy at sea when we are busy polluting land. And it's based on the fact that there are equally resources on land which we can utilize to support the blue economy. It's called the green economy, like hydropower, like there's nothing we say that you can't have wind power on land. We have high mountains on land. So I think that is the idea, that unless we take care of the green economy, then we should be shooting ourselves in the foot. I think.
Thank you, Professor. For this.
Just adding on that point, I think that it's also important we need to, improve our understanding between land and sea nexus. If we can improve that understanding, then it will change the thing, because we need to advocate for that kind of understanding, taking into account the land and sea nexus. Then probably we might get some kind of clear idea about that. But it's still, this thing is still, is not developed yet in that context. So these two concepts, the blue or green or brown, whatever, it will exist for a certain period of time. That's my view.
So we have already finished our time, but of course, I will give you the floor. Please, the microphone is going.
Just a very quick question.
Okay, then you, I promise. I'm sorry.
I have two questions. First, my question is related to MPA. How the management of MPA getting complicated when we have dispute settlement procedure or delimitation issues into the picture and into the region. How we can understand why MPA matters, and thank you for clarification. But indeed, besides those importance in region, if we want to apply MPAs, what kind of complication we might have if we have any dispute cases related to delimitation of maritime boundaries. Second question is about fragmentation, and I do love, Professor, your presentation, because indeed it's very much a case when it comes to environmental protection issues. But here I'm interested what would be the international organizations and states' role to somehow easy and create the environment where fragmentation would be avoided a bit, and the relevant interpretation and correct interpretation, I would say coherent interpretation, might take place of the international legal instruments and provisions. Thank you for giving an opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Madam Chen. Thank you for the question. Very important question indeed. I think it again goes back to the fact that there are different types of MPs, like I mentioned earlier. So to not answer it in a very elaborative manner, I think some basic points needs to be considered. For instance, is it just within a particular country's waters? It gets a bit easier to tackle in that sense if there are any kind of pollution debates or argument, because then your national laws will be applicable. It gets more difficult when it involves transboundary. And there are cases, like for instance, we've got one that we share with Philippines, for instance. Then you have two countries with a management regime that needs to be streamlined. If you cannot streamline the management provisions in place, it becomes very, very difficult. That's one example. The other one, if I can tie it back to BSNC, the thing is, we are allowed to come up with our own enforcement APMs that I mentioned earlier. But it requires so much of international agreement into this because of the nature of these MPAs. And I can go on and on, depending on case by case, where the location and what the provisions really are. Same goes, too bad we couldn't get more time to discuss the 30 by 30, which is a big thing now. Again, it's a whole different set of discussions, and same goes for MPAs on high seas. Now, those are some of the complicated issues where it halts nations to move forward with some of these provisions. But again, it's a very, very important question and needs further emphasis, especially when it goes transboundary. I hope I try to answer that. Thank you.
A very short answer from Professor, and then the last question, and then we will be finishing our session. Please, Professor.
Really difficult because very challenging questions. I'm happy to discuss further afterwards, okay, to say that from the outset. First, the main role of states in counteracting fragmentation is to conclude wise agreements. And I think that the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea is a prime example because, it includes certain tools that are helpful in order to combat fragmentation. Apart from that, I think that fragmentation is actually a state problem, and it starts on the domestic level, as somebody said, because sometimes different ministries are, negotiating different treaties depending on their responsibilities. So, they contribute to fragmentation, meaning international organizations and institutions should have a prime word in the issue. And to give you just one example, UN Oceans has been created by the UN General Assembly as a network agency in order to just tie together all the different institutions concerning marine and environmental protection. That's just one example, and for the rest, coffee break.
Thank you, Professor. And the last question of this session is coming.
Thank you very much. I have a question for Cheryl regarding the PSSA in the Malacca Strait. Because if I remember correctly, there's a cooperative mechanism between Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore for the Strait of Singapore, Malacca under Article 43 of the Convention. Now, one of the pillars of that framework is a forum where the littoral state can discuss issues with the user states. Have Malaysia in particular have ever considered using that as a vehicle to gain support for the PSSA before going to the IMO? That's my question. Thank you.
Quickly. Thank you very much, and it is a very relevant question. In fact, that was the main platform that we used, and hence I pointed out during the presentation that sometimes factors that influence this kind of debate at IMO comes in an unusual manner, because it was a precursor for Malaysia to bring up a PSSA potentially in the Strait of Malacca would need us to go first through the cooperative mechanism on the Strait of Malacca, which is mainly involving our neighboring states, Singapore and Indonesia. We had to convince them that this is the benefit for, we were succeeding to a certain extent, and then of course the user states, and that's where we discussed. We managed to get the buy-in, but we were hampered at the last stage on boundary issue, which is, if you really notice, this is totally out of the PSSA's requirement. Down south in Strait of Malacca, there's a grey area, unfortunately. The boundaries are not really delimited at the moment. So using this as a pressure point, if I may say, that issue was brought up at IMO, despite to having it cleared at CF, numerous CFs. So sometimes it comes out of the box, and unfortunately it happens because of political will and so on. I'm happy to discuss further.
Thank you, Ms. Rita. And with your permission, I am closing this session. I would like to thank all the speakers for their valuable contributions, and to you, and have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your valuable contribution to us, dear speakers, and your attendance, ladies and gentlemen. We will now have a 10-minute coffee break, in which a volunteer researcher from DECAM, Avrasya, who is a brilliant pianist, will perform a short recital for our distinguished guests. Afterwards, we will continue with the third and last session of the